Well, welcome to the 700 Club. There is going to be a vote on Capitol Hill today, and that's President Trump's message to congressional Republicans. He says he's done negotiating, and he wants a vote today on the plan to repeal and replace Obamacare.
Many Republicans still aren't on board with the House leadership's plan. And if the bill fails, the president says Obamacare will remain in place for now. CBN News White House correspondent Jennifer Wishon brings us the story from Washington.
Instead of voting Thursday night, members of the conservative House Freedom Caucus filed into Speaker Paul Ryan's office, followed by Trump advisor Steve Bannon and Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. President Donald Trump's plain-spoken, no-nonsense budget director, Mick Mulvaney, spoke to lawmakers behind closed doors. Mulvaney's message? The president is done negotiating. He wants a vote. And whether the American Health Care Act is voted up or down, Trump is moving on. This follows a week where both the president and vice president have personally worked to win over lawmakers.
This is, and I think a lot of members realize this, if you want to get Obamacare off the books and repeal it, this is the first step. And we only get one shot through reconciliation. You don't get a do-over.
After negotiations Thursday with both conservative and moderate Republicans, Speaker Ryan announced an amendment designed to garner enough votes from the wavering conservatives to pass the bill over to the Senate. The amendment gives states the power to define essential health benefits, currently mandated by Obamacare. Critics say giving Washington the power to say what insurance plans need to cover, whether people need that coverage or not, has been a big reason why the cost of insurance has gone up so much. The amendment also dedicates an additional $15 billion to the Patient and State Stability Fund to provide resources for services like maternity, mental health, and substance abuse care. And it delays the repeal of the Medicare tax increase for 6 years, which helps pay for that increased $15 billion to states. Speaker Ryan needs most Republicans on board, since no Democrats are expected to support the legislation.
Right now, the main sales pitch for this legislation is, well, it's not as bad as Obamacare. Well, not being as bad as Obamacare, that's a pretty low bar, and that doesn't make it good.
For some lawmakers, pro-life language in the bill is a selling point.
We also take out a lot of the provisions currently in Obamacare that are paying for abortion with taxpayer dollars, and that is just wrong.
Votes or not, the showdown happens today. If it fails, Obamacare remains the law of the land. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
Well, joining us now from Capitol Hill is Congressman Louie Gohmert of Texas. He's a member of the House Freedom Caucus, and they've been opposed to the current bill on health care. And Congressman, thanks for being with us.
Sure, Gordon. Good to be with you. It's not going to be a pleasant day, and the bill is a problem. It was based on a false premise that we had to thread a needle, we've been told for weeks, because there were just so many things we wanted that couldn't be in the bill because it wouldn't survive the parliamentarian, and we can't know what the parliamentarian will decide until we pass our bill and send it to the Senate. Well, Senator Mike Lee found out this week, actually, all you had to do was go ask the parliamentarian, and she would tell you what she thought, and the parliamentarian doesn't rule. The parliamentarian only advises the presiding officer, either Mike Pence or Mitch McConnell or whoever he appoints. And so we've been told, gee, but you can take consolation in the fact we're going to give a lot more power to the federal government, and we'll be able to create a new federal exchange to take high-risk people. Really, the answer is more federal government, more federal intervention, and they don't have a good answer for what about when the next Democrat becomes Secretary of Health and Human Services. I trust Tom Price, but the answer is not more federal government to fix things. That's how we got in trouble with Obamacare. And so this isn't keeping our promise. I understand the president's frustration. I thank God that he got elected, that he worked so hard to get elected. I understand he's never had to rely on people people to draft documents that he didn't hire, that weren't looking out for his best interests. But I hope that eventually he'll understand we're on his side, but this bill is not what any of us promised. I don't care what it does. Yes, it's got some helpful stuff with Planned Parenthood, finally, which we haven't taken care of. And so you dangle that in there to pass an albatross that will be a terrible thing. Oh, yeah, and by the way, we're told costs may double in the next couple of years, around that, but 2-3 years from now, maybe they'll come down 10% if everything works out. I've got people that are hurting now because of Obamacare. The costs have been driven up, and I'm supposed to go back and say, I voted for a bill, and your bills will maybe double for a couple of years. Don't worry, they might come down 10%. That's not what we promised we would do. And I'm sorry, I represent the interests of over 700,000 people, and I also play to an audience of one as well. So,
Congressman,
I'm not selling my integrity for anybody. It'd be very pleasant to have been part of the cheerleading crowd and gotten the standing ovations at conference instead of being accused of being a coward. This is not a fun day for me, but it's the right thing to do.
Well, I'm not sure it's going to be a fun day for anybody. Walk us through the reconciliation process in the Senate, because I think a lot of people just don't understand that's been one of the main selling points here, if you will.
People keep saying, great question, and if people have been told it's just so complicated. Gordon, it's not that complicated. We've been told the Byrd rule is so complicated. It's not that complicated. I had a copy with me all day yesterday so I could show people it's not complicated. Because reconciliation involves the budget, then anything that is merely incidental, and that's the word in the law and the rule, if it's merely incidentally affecting the budget, then it doesn't survive and stay part of the this process, the reconciliation process. But if it has any kind of material effect on the budget spending, then absolutely it survives the Byrd rule. And my goodness, if we do the right thing and actually go in and take, as the president and Mitch McConnell promised, Mitch said we'll rip it out, root and branch. This adds a lot of branches and a lot of roots. But if we did what we promised, of course it would survive the Byrd rule. Of course it would have a major effect. And anyway, when you base this on the premise that we can't know until we pass it and send it to the parliamentarian whether she will advise the president, or vice president rather, president of the Senate, to allow it in. By the way, so what happens? Somebody, one of the Democrats, can stand up and say in the Senate, point of order, this does not survive the Byrd rule. It's not material. It's merely incidental to the budget. And then the vice president, if he's in the chair, or whoever Mitch McConnell appoints to be pro tem, will have the parliamentarian whisper in his or her ear, and then that person will rule. Not what the parliamentarian says, but what they believe. And the truth is, the things we were proposing that would dramatically bring down costs would survive that process, and the vice president or the president of the Senate, whoever's presiding, should rule, yes, this materially affects the budget, it stays in, your point of order is overruled, at which time that person could say, I appeal the ruling of the chair, at which time one of the Republican senators can say, I move to table the appeal of the ruling of the chair, which takes priority over everything but a motion to adjourn, no debate, and you move to a vote right then on whether to table the appeal of the ruling of the chair. And since there's a majority of Republicans, whatever the vice president or the president pro tem rules would be upheld, and they would move on. And what we put in there that would materially affect the budget, that would save Americans massive dollars, that would survive, and it would pass the Senate, and President Trump would sign it. That's the bottom line. And that is not what we have done. We have not kept our word here.
Well, Congressman, if it doesn't go through the reconciliation process, aren't you then into the potential for filibuster, and you don't have 60 votes in the Senate to pass it? And at that point in time, Obamacare is going to stay as the law of the land. Aren't you worried about that?
I am concerned about adding more federal power, adding more federal dollars, giving more restriction in the short term, more federal government power in the short term, and then being promised. But remember, this will go away probably in 5 years. That is not what I've experienced in my 12 years. When a federal program starts, as Ronald Reagan said, that's the closest thing on earth to eternal life, when you create a federal program. And I've seen it firsthand. I cannot be bought off by assurances that we'll have less federal government for the first time if we just trust more federal government in the short term. That's not a solution. This is not what we promised.
All right. I'll leave it at that. That's a good bottom line. Congressman Louie Gohmert, thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Gordon. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, I hope you're able to follow through all of that. The reconciliation process is a big deal, and that gets you out of any kind of filibuster. And the frank news is that the Republicans don't have the votes in the Senate to get it through a filibuster process. So if it doesn't go through this way, you're going to see Obamacare stay as the law of the land. And the prediction on that is there are going to be massive increases in the premiums for those who are in that program. You're going to see insurance companies bail out of the exchanges. The exchanges are then going to fail, and that will be a very interesting time in America. And we're all going to have front row seats. I know we got lost in the parliamentary rules, but that is the process here. That's how hard it is to get anything through both the Congress and the Senate. The framers intended it that way. They intended it to be hard. To pass things, because they all understood once something becomes the law of the land, it's very difficult to change it. So we're into a very good season. What's your takeaway from all of that?
Well, my question is, and I think probably a lot of people are feeling this. Okay, so if the count is not what it needs to be, and Obamacare stays the law of the land, what's the future? I mean, can they come back at this again somewhere down the road with a better bill?
Well, then, if they propose a new bill, and that new bill makes everyone on the Republican caucus, Republican Party happy, well, it passes Congress, but then it's going to face the filibuster in the Senate. And that won't be part of the budget reconciliation process. You can't get it passed with 51 votes. You're going to be faced with a filibuster. So they're stuck, and they're stuck with their own rules.
And people like Mr. Gohmert are stuck as well, because if you're not willing to put your name on the line for something you don't feel is passing muster as far as what was promised, then what do you do? I mean, it's... Well,
the real tragedy is if you are part of the Obamacare system, what do you do now?
Yes.
And how do you get health insurance?
What a mess.
And how will that be affordable? And that is a train wreck we can all see coming. The exchanges are already failed, and you already see Democrats saying it. You know, former President Clinton was saying it during the campaign. Yeah. So the predictions are all there, and you're going to have failure of that system. We're into how do we govern? How do we govern a divided nation? And it's so polarized right now. I don't see much hope of getting things through. Well, we've got to move on. In other news, British authorities have made more arrests in connection with that deadly terrorist attack in London. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That's right, Gordon. 2 more people have been taken into custody after the attack that killed 4 people near the British Parliament Wednesday. A counterterrorism commander there called the arrests significant, but no additional details have been released. The suspect in the attack has been identified as 52-year-old Khalid Massoud, a British national. Surveillance video caught Massoud driving a car across the crowded bridge, plowing through pedestrians before smashing into a railing outside Parliament. He then ran from his car and was shot and killed by police. ISIS is calling him a soldier of the Islamic State. Well, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has set up a potential Democratic filibuster against the president's nominee for the Supreme Court. Senator Schumer announced his opposition to Judge Neil Gorsuch Thursday, saying changing the Senate rules to confirm him is not the right answer.
If this nominee cannot earn 60 votes, a bar met by each of President Obama's nominees and George Bush's last two nominees. The answer isn't to change the rules. It's to change the nominee.
Normally, 60 votes are required to confirm a Supreme Court nominee, but Republicans have talked about changing the rules and using the nuclear option, which would allow them to confirm Gorsuch with just 51 votes. And Gordon, that's something they're already doing to confirm lower court federal judges.
Well, that was because of a rule change, and it was done by the Democrats just 3 years ago. They changed the rules for lower court nominees to get things through the Senate without 60 votes. So they left in place Supreme Court nominees, and we'll see. Will Judge Gorsuch go down in history as the one that got rid of that, and the nuclear option was imposed and the Senate rules changed. I personally think this is just payback for Judge Garland. Judge Garland never even got to a hearing. And the Democrats are just looking for a scalp to put on the wall to say, okay, this is tit for tat, and we'll see. But Washington, boy, has it ever gotten crazy up there. And we're all going to pay the price here. And our nation is divided. Let me encourage you, please pray for America. Pray for our leadership. Can we be one nation under God, indivisible? The division seems so sharp. The polarization is just incredible. Can we ever come together and actually say, can we govern ourselves? Can we have a republic that is based on democratic principles? Can we do that? Can we come together for the good of the nation?